The gleaming spires of New Geneva stretched toward the stars, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the light of Earth's setting sun. Inside the Global Assembly's Grand Chamber, Ambassador Sarah Chen watched the holographic representations of 17 alien species flicker in the dimmed light. Her dark eyes, sharp with decades of diplomatic experience, tracked every subtle movement, every micro-expression of the assembled representatives. The chamber's usual low hum of conversation had died hours ago. Now only the soft whir of environmental systems broke the tense silence as first speaker Vixthar of the Myriad Collective rose from their hovering platform. Their iridescent scales shifted through shades of deep purple, a sign of barely contained rage that Chen had learned to recognize over the years. The human expansion into the Perseus arm cannot continue. Vexthar's translator rendered their harmonic speech into crisp English. You have established 37 colonies in what has historically been neutral space, space that, by ancient right, falls under Myriad protection. Chen remained seated, her posture relaxed but alert. The Myriad had spent the last 3 hours presenting their case, each word carefully chosen to paint humanity as reckless upstarts. Now it was her turn. "Thank you, first speaker," she said, rising smoothly. Her voice carried naturally through the chamber, a skill honed through countless negotiations. "I've listened carefully to the Myriad's concerns. However, I must correct several misrepresentations in your statement." She gestured, and a new hologram bloomed above the chamber's center. Star systems appeared in brilliant detail, with legal boundaries clearly marked. The Perseus Arm colonies you reference were established in accordance with the Galactic Charter of Settlement, specifically Articles 7 through 12. Each world was surveyed, found to be unclaimed, and developed according to protocol. Vixthar's scales flickered to a deep red. The charter you cite was written by species who had no understanding of the deeper patterns of galactic settlement. The Myriad have maintained order in that sector for 50,000 years. Maintained order, Chen repeated softly, or enforced stagnation. A ripple of movement passed through the assembled representatives. The Centaurian delegates' tentacles coiled tightly, their species equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. The Rixen representatives' bioluminescent patterns quickened. Humanity has been part of the galactic community for less than 2 centuries. Vixthar continued, their translator struggling to keep their harmonics neutral. Yet you question practices that have kept peace since before your species learned to make fire. Chen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Age doesn't automatically confer wisdom, first speaker, nor does it grant rights over free space. She expanded the hologram, highlighting specific systems. In the past 50 years, 17 species have applied for settlement rights in the Perseus Arm. All were denied by the Myriad Collective without explanation. We simply chose not to ask permission, because you knew it would be denied. Vixthar's translator crackled with distortion as their harmonic range exceeded its capabilities. "No," Chen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Because we knew it shouldn't be denied. The Perseus Arm can support thousands of thriving worlds. Its resources could lift dozens of species out of poverty and energy scarcity. Yet it sits empty because the Myriad Collective believes they alone should determine the fate of an entire spiral arm." She turned, addressing the full assembly now. "Look at what we've accomplished in just 50 years. The Perseus Development Zone now hosts colonies from 6 different species who partnered with humanity. Trade has increased 400%. Scientific research stations have made breakthrough discoveries in dark matter physics. This isn't chaos, it's progress. Progress that threatens the very stability of galactic society." Vixthar countered. Their scales had shifted to almost black, a color Chen had never seen before. "The Myriad Collective has made its decision. You will begin evacuating your colonies within 1 standard cycle or face the consequences." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Direct threats in the assembly were virtually unheard of. Chen felt the weight of the moment settle onto her shoulders. Everything hinged on what she said next. She took a deliberate breath, letting the silence stretch. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the chamber. Vixthar's scales froze in a pattern of mottled gray and black. Their response came slowly. "You dare to spy on myriad military movements." "We dare to protect our interests," Chen corrected. "Just as we dared to settle those worlds. Just as we dare now to reject your ultimatum entirely." She stood straighter, her voice taking on an edge of steel. "Humanity will not evacuate a single colony. We will not bow to threats. And if the Myriad Collective chooses war, they should understand something vital. We've been expecting it." The chamber exploded into chaos. Multiple representatives began speaking at once, their various translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Through it all, Chen held Vixthar's gaze. "You cannot hope to stand against the Myriad fleet," the first speaker said, their translator barely catching the words. Chen's smile returned, and this time it reached her eyes. "That's the problem with being the dominant power for 50,000 years. First speaker, you start to believe your own legends. Humanity doesn't need to stand against your fleet." She paused, letting her next words fall like stones into still water. "We've already neutralized it." The chaos in the chamber doubled. Vixthar's scales went completely white, a reaction Chen had never seen documented in any xenobiology text. "Impossible," they whispered. 3 hours ago, while you were listing our violations of Myriad tradition, quantum-locked missiles were activating throughout the Dark Nebula region. Your fleet is currently surrounded by enough firepower to reduce it to atomic particles. The missiles are running on autonomous systems and will execute their programming if any ship attempts to leave the nebula." Chen's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "This is not a threat, first speaker. This is a negotiation. The Myriad Collective can choose to enter real diplomatic talks about the future of the Perseus Arm. Talks that include all species, not just humanity. Or they can choose war. But they should know that humanity has spent the last 50 years preparing for either outcome." She turned to address the full assembly one final time. "The age of single-species dominance is over. The galaxy is changing. The only question is whether that change will come through cooperation or conflict. Humanity prefers the former, but we are prepared for the latter." The silence that followed was absolute. Chen remained standing, her heart pounding, but her exterior showing nothing but absolute certainty. Everything now depended on whether the Myriad would realize she was bluffing about the missiles. But then again, was she? The corners of her mouth twitched slightly as she watched Vixthar's scales slowly shift through patterns she'd never seen before. Sometimes the best diplomatic strategy was keeping your opponents wondering exactly what you were capable of. The next move belonged to the Myriad. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. 12 hours after her confrontation with the Myriad Collective, Sarah Chen stood in the heart of Earth's strategic command, known simply as the Vault. The facility, buried 2 kilometers beneath the Himalayas, hummed with activity as holographic displays tracked movements across thousands of light-years of space. "The Myriad haven't called our bluff yet," Admiral James Okonjo said, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical displays. "But they will. It's only a matter of time before they realize there aren't actually any quantum-locked missiles in the Dark Nebula." Chen smiled, watching a cluster of red dots representing the trapped Myriad fleet. "Are we certain about that, Admiral?" Okonjo's eyebrows rose. "You mean?" "I mean that sometimes the best way to keep a secret is to let everyone think they know your secrets." She turned to face the assembled Earth Defense Council. "The Myriad are correct that we couldn't possibly have developed quantum-locked missile technology, which is exactly why we did." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Director Elena Rossi of Special Projects leaned forward. "Ambassador, are you saying we actually have their fleet contained?" "Not exactly," Chen replied. "We have something better." "Show them, Admiral." Okonjo nodded and activated a secure channel. The main display shifted, showing a different view of the Dark Nebula region. Scattered throughout the gas clouds were thousands of tiny points of light, too small to be ships, too numerous to be natural phenomena. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen said, "meet the Fireflies, the smallest FTL-capable drones ever created. Each one carries a payload equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. They'd been seeded throughout the nebula for the past 3 years, disguised as natural electromagnetic phenomena." Colonel Sarah Martinez, head of Special Operations, whistled softly. The myriad sensors would read them as normal nebula discharge. "Brilliant. We can thank the ARCSR for that particular bit of technology," Chen said. "Which brings me to the real reason I called this meeting. The Myriad's ultimatum has accelerated our timetable, but it hasn't changed our strategy. Operation Shadow Alliance is now in full effect." A holographic display changed again, showing a complex network of connections between various species and systems. At the center was Earth, but branching out from it were dozens of links to civilizations most humans had never heard of. "For the past 50 years, Chen continued, "while the Myriad watched our official colonies and diplomatic missions, we've been building relationships with species they considered beneath their notice. The ARCSR, whose sensor masking technology we're using. The Nix Collective, who helped us develop the Fireflies. The Velery, whose quantum communication networks let us coordinate without the Myriad's knowledge. All species the Myriad dismissed as primitive or unimportant," Okonjo added. "All species who had their own reasons to want the old order changed." "Exactly." Chen's fingers danced through the hologram, highlighting specific connections. Each of these species contributed something unique. The Myriad's greatest weakness is their arrogance, their absolute certainty that no lesser species could possibly challenge them. They never considered that we might unite the very civilizations they'd spent millennia keeping apart. Director Rossi studied the display intently. "The Myriad's ultimatum. You knew it was coming, didn't you? This whole confrontation was planned." "Anticipated, not planned," Chen corrected. "We knew they wouldn't tolerate our expansion forever. Their entire power structure is built on controlling access to resources and territory. Our success in the Perseus Arm threatened that control. They had to respond eventually." "And now?" Colonel Martinez asked. "What's our next move?" Chen's expression hardened. "Now we reveal just enough of our hand to make them doubt everything they think they know about humanity. The Fireflies are real, but they're just the beginning. Each of our primitive allies is preparing to launch their own operations. The Velery are about to demonstrate their quantum communications by simultaneously shutting down Myriad sensor networks across 50 systems. The Nix will reveal that they've mapped every Myriad supply line and military installation in their sector. The ARCSR." She paused, allowing herself a small smile. "Well, let's just say the ARCSR have some particularly creative surprises planned." "You're talking about completely reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy," Okonjo said quietly. "The Myriad won't just accept this." "No," Chen agreed. "They won't, which is why every move has to be precisely calculated. The Fireflies aren't meant to destroy their fleet. They're meant to make the Myriad realize they're not as untouchable as they thought. Each revelation about our capabilities and allies will force them to reevaluate their position." She turned to face the Council again. "Make no mistake, this is the most dangerous game humanity has ever played. If we show too much of our hand too quickly, the Myriad might decide to strike immediately, before we can reveal more surprises. If we show too little, they might call our bluff about the missiles. We have to maintain perfect balance, perfect timing." "And our colonies?" Martins asked. "They're still vulnerable." "Not as vulnerable as the Myriad thinks," Chen replied. "Those 37 colonies aren't just settlement projects. They're fortress worlds. Each one has been designed from the ground up with defense in mind. Underground cities, automated defense systems, and technology from half a dozen different species that the Myriad doesn't even know exists." The display shifted again, showing the detailed defensive capabilities of the Perseus Arm colonies. Shield generators hidden in mountain ranges, automated drone factories buried beneath ocean floors, planetary defense systems disguised as mining operations. "We've spent 50 years preparing for this moment," Chen said. "Every colony, every trade agreement, every diplomatic mission. It's all been building to this. The myriad think they're dealing with upstart humans who don't know their place. They're about to learn they're dealing with something far more dangerous. Humans who've learned from every mistake made by every empire in history." Admiral Okonjo studied the tactical displays, his expression thoughtful. "And if they don't learn? If they choose war anyway?" Chen's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Then they'll discover that humanity hasn't just been preparing for war. We've been preparing to change the very nature of how wars are fought in this galaxy. The myriad have spent 50,000 years perfecting massive fleet engagements and overwhelming force. We've spent 50 years learning how to make such tactics obsolete." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just challenging the myriad's power. They were challenging the very foundations that power was built on. Win or lose, the galaxy would never be the same. "Your orders," Chen concluded, "are to maintain absolute readiness while revealing nothing. Let the myriad think they've found all our secrets. Let them think they understand the game we're playing. Because the truth is, they haven't even begun to understand what humanity is truly capable of." As if to punctuate her words, a new alert appeared on the tactical display. The myriad fleet in the dark nebula had begun to move. The myriad struck at dawn, Universal Standard Time. Their attack on the Perseus colony of New Horizons should have been devastating. A classic overwhelming force maneuver perfected over 50 millennia. 300 capital ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapon systems charged and targeting arrays locked on the seemingly defenseless human settlement below. They found nothing but empty buildings and holographic projections. In the command center, buried 2 kilometers beneath New Horizons' northern mountain range, Colonial Defense Director Maya Patil allowed herself a tight smile as she watched the myriad fleet's confusion play out on her tactical displays. "Colonists successfully evacuated 12 hours ago," her XO reported. "All 30,000 of them transferred through the quantum tunnels before the myriad even entered the system." Maya nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the swarm of enemy ships above. "And our guests. The Valerie observation team is in position. They're recording everything." The myriad ships held their formation, likely scanning for any sign of the colony's population. Maya could almost imagine their confusion. The settlement appeared intact, lights on, environmental systems running, even automated vehicles moving along predetermined routes, but not a single human life sign to be found. "They're launching ground forces," her sensor officer announced. "Looks like they're not taking any chances after the Dark Nebula incident." "Perfect." Maya opened a secure channel to Earth Strategic Command. "Operation Ghostlight is proceeding as planned." The myriad took the bait, requesting authorization for Phase 2. Ambassador Chen's voice came through clearly. "Authorization granted. Director Patel, show them what humanity has learned about asymmetrical warfare." Maya's smile widened as she entered the activation codes. Throughout the seemingly abandoned colony, microscopic machines that had been masquerading as dust particles suddenly came alive. They swarmed through the myriad ground forces like invisible piranhas, disabling weapons, disrupting communications, and infiltrating environmental suits. Nanite swarms performing exactly as the Nix designed them, her tech officer reported with satisfaction. Myriad ground forces are completely disabled. No casualties, but they're not going anywhere. Above, the myriad fleet was already responding, energy weapons charging as they prepared to glass the surface. Maya watched the countdown timer on her main display tick down to 0. Activate the Arxer defense grid. Across New Horizons' northern continent, what had appeared to be natural rock formations suddenly shifted. Crystalline structures emerged from the ground, each one a marvel of bioengineered technology. The Arxer, despite their relatively primitive spaceflight capabilities, were masters of crystalline computing and energy manipulation. The myriad's first volley of energy weapons simply disappeared, absorbed by the crystal arrays. Their second volley was caught and redirected, forcing several of their own ships to raise shields against their own fire. "Signal the Velary," Maya ordered. "Time to show the galaxy what really happened here today." Across thousands of worlds, on every major communications network in known space, the Velary quantum communication system activated. Every sentient species in the galaxy watched as the mighty Myriad Collective failed to conquer a single human colony. "Incoming transmission from the Myriad flagship," her comm officer announced. First speaker Vixthar's image appeared on Maya's screen, their scales a molten pattern of rage and confusion. "What is this treachery? Where are your people?" "Safe," Maya replied simply. "Did you really think we'd leave our civilians in harm's way? We've had 50,000 years of your military history to study." First speaker: "We knew exactly how you'd attack." "Impossible," Vixthar hissed. "No species could predict." "No single species could," Maya corrected. "But we had help. The Arxer provided the defense grid. The Nyx designed our nanite swarms. The Velary made sure everyone would see what happened here, and humanity. We just had to learn from history and be willing to think differently." She leaned forward, her voice taking on an edge of steel. "This colony is now under the protection of the Shadow Alliance. I suggest you withdraw your forces before we're forced to demonstrate more of our capabilities. You dare to threaten." "This isn't a threat, first speaker. It's a lesson. One that's being broadcast across the galaxy right now. The age of overwhelming force is over. The species you dismissed as primitive, they've been quietly advancing in ways you never bothered to notice. Ways that make your traditional military doctrine obsolete." On her tactical display, Maya could see more Myriad ships arriving in the system. Reinforcements arriving exactly as predicted. She gave the signal, and throughout the system, thousands of Firefly drones activated, surrounding the newly arrived vessels. "You have 1 hour to withdraw," she continued. "After that, we'll be forced to demonstrate the full capabilities of our drone network. And unlike at the Dark Nebula, these ones aren't just for show." The transmission cut off abruptly. Maya leaned back in her chair, watching the tactical display as the Myriad fleet held position. They were facing a choice now: retreat and lose face before the entire galaxy, or press the attack and risk discovering what other surprises humanity and its allies had prepared. "Signal from Earth," her comm officer announced. "Ambassador Chen sends congratulations. The Nyx have confirmed similar defensive successes at 3 other colony worlds. The Myriad's simultaneous attacks all failed." Maya nodded, unsurprised. "And the other matter? The Arxer report their deep space sensors are tracking major fleet movements in 6 different sectors. The Myriad are mobilizing everything they have." "Good." Maya's expression was grim but satisfied. "They're reacting exactly as the ambassador predicted. Send word to all Shadow Alliance members. Operation Fracture Point is now in effect." As she watched the Myriad fleet begin a grudging withdrawal from New Horizons orbit, Maya reflected on the strange paths that had led to this moment. Humanity, barely spacefaring by galactic standards, had looked at the mighty Myriad Collective and seen not an invincible empire, but a giant grown complacent in its power. The real victory wasn't in the technology or the tactics. It was in understanding that true strength didn't come from dominating others, but from building connections they never expected. The Myriad had spent 50,000 years keeping species isolated and dependent. Humanity had spent 50 years showing them the power of cooperation. Now the galaxy was about to learn which approach was stronger. Her tactical display chimed, showing new fleet movements. The Myriad weren't retreating to lick their wounds. They were regrouping for a larger attack. But that too had been anticipated. Maya opened a channel to Ambassador Chen. "They've taken the bait, ma'am. Moving to Phase 3. Chen's response was immediate. "Excellent. The board is set. Now let's show them the true meaning of asymmetrical warfare." The real war was about to begin. But unlike any war the galaxy had seen before, This one would be fought with shadows and whispers as much as ships and weapons, and humanity had gotten very good at fighting from the shadows. The Galactic Assembly hadn't met in emergency session for over 3,000 years. Now, barely a week after the failed attacks on human colonies, representatives from every known species crowded the chamber. The air crackled with tension as Ambassador Sarah Chen took the speaking platform. Behind her, holographic displays showed the current state of the conflict. Dozens of myriad fleets, marked in angry red, scattered across the galaxy. Each cluster represented thousands of ships, the product of 50 millennia of military supremacy. Yet for all their might, they hadn't managed to take a single human world. The Myriad Collective, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, has spent the past week attempting to demonstrate their military superiority. They have failed, not because humanity is stronger, but because we understand something they have forgotten. The galaxy has changed. The displays shifted, showing recordings from the various battles. Myriad ships firing at holographic targets, while real colonies lay safely hidden. Crystalline defense systems absorbing and redirecting energy weapons. Swarms of microscopic machines neutralizing ground forces without bloodshed. What you're seeing isn't just military technology, Chen continued. It's the product of cooperation between species the Myriad dismissed as primitive. The Arxer, who never developed faster than light travel, but mastered crystal-based computing. The Nyx, whose nanite technology evolved from their need to survive on a hostile homeworld. The Velari, who turned their planet's quantum phenomena into a galaxy-wide communication network. First speaker Vixthar rose from their platform, scales shifting through shades of rage. You dare to mock our power? Our fleets still vastly outnumber yours. We have merely been surprised by your tactics. That advantage is gone now. Chen's smile was razor-sharp. Is it, first speaker? Or have you simply seen what we wanted you to see? With a gesture, she changed the displays again. This time, they showed something that made even Vixthar's scales go pale. Detailed scans of myriad shipyards, supply lines, and military installations. Not just current data, but historical records going back decades. For 50 years, Chen said quietly, while you watched our official colonies and diplomatic missions, we were building something you never expected. An intelligence network that spans the galaxy. Every trade ship that visited a myriad world carried sensors designed by the Nyx. Every communication you sent was intercepted by Velari quantum receivers. Every military exercise you conducted was analyzed by Arxer crystalline computers. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as Chen continued. We know the location of every ship you've built in the past 5 decades. We know your supply lines, your command structures, your emergency protocols. We know that your apparent military superiority relies on carefully managed logistics chains that all flow through just 17 key systems. Vixthar's translator crackled with distortion. You lie. Our security was designed to stop direct attacks and obvious espionage. Chen cut in. But you never thought to look for crystalline computers disguised as decorative items in your diplomatic gifts. You never suspected that the quantum fluctuations in your communication systems were actually Velari monitoring devices. You never imagined that the microscopic machines cleaning your ship's hulls were gathering data. She turned to address the full assembly. The Myriad built their empire on the assumption that technological advancement follows a predictable path. They judged species by their spaceflight capabilities, their energy weapons, their fleet sizes. They never understood that true advancement can take unexpected forms. The displays shifted again, showing new data. Trade routes between supposedly primitive worlds. Scientific breakthroughs in fields the Myriad had dismissed as dead ends. Technological innovations that had gone unnoticed because they didn't fit the expected pattern of development. Humanity didn't just build colonies in the Perseus Arm, Chen revealed. We built connections. We showed isolated species that they didn't have to accept myriad dominance. We proved that cooperation between different technological paths could create something greater than the sum of its parts. She focused her attention back on Vixthar. Your fleets are impressive, first speaker. But right now, Arxur crystal arrays are embedded in the shield generators of every major Myriad installation. Nyx nanite swarms have infiltrated your shipyards. Velari quantum transmitters are ready to disable your communication networks. And humanity's Firefly drones are positioned to strike at every single one of your critical supply lines. The silence in the chamber was absolute as Chen delivered her final point. You don't have to believe me, of course. You can test our capabilities, try to force a traditional military confrontation. But ask yourself this. In the past week, has a single one of your attacks gone as planned? Has any of your intelligence proven reliable? Are you certain you understand the full extent of what you're facing? Vixthar's scales had settled into a mottled pattern of uncertainty, a sight no one in the assembly had ever seen before. You would destroy everything. Plunge the galaxy into chaos. No, Chen's voice softened. We want to build something better. The Shadow Alliance isn't meant to replace Myriad dominance with human control. It's meant to prove that cooperation between different species, different technological paths, different ways of thinking. That's the real path to advancement. She gestured one final time, and the displays showed a new image, a network of connections between worlds, species, and technologies, all working together in ways the Myriad had never imagined possible. The choice is yours, first speaker. Continue this conflict, and we will be forced to demonstrate just how vulnerable your empire truly is. Or join us in building something new, something that doesn't rely on dominance and control, but on cooperation and mutual advancement. As the assembly chamber buzzed with whispered conversations, Chen watched Vixthar carefully. The first speaker's scales were cycling through colors so quickly they appeared to blur. The next few moments would determine whether the galaxy would see war or transformation. But in truth, the outcome had been decided 50 years ago, when humanity first looked at the galaxy and saw not an established order to be accepted, but a puzzle to be solved. The Myriad had spent 50 millennia perfecting their ability to dominate. Humanity had spent 50 years proving that dominance wasn't the only path to power. Now it was time to see which approach would shape the galaxy's future. 3 days after Ambassador Chen's revelation to the Galactic Assembly, the Myriad's response came not with the thunder of weapons, but with a whisper that changed the galaxy. In a private chamber deep within New Geneva's diplomatic quarter, Sarah Chen sat across from first speaker Vixthar. No holograms, no fleets in orbit, no theatrical displays of power, just two representatives, meeting in person for the first time. Your kind, Vixthar said, their scales shifting through subtle shades of blue-green, has achieved something no species has managed in 50,000 years. You've made the Myriad doubt. Chen poured tea into 2 cups, one standard human ceramic, one specially designed to accommodate Myriad biology. Doubt isn't always a weakness, first speaker. Sometimes it's the first step toward wisdom. Perhaps. Vixthar's translator rendered a sound that might have been a laugh. Our analysts have spent the past 3 days attempting to verify your claims about our compromised systems. Do you know what they found? Nothing, Chen replied, sliding 1 cup across the table. Because the Arxur crystals are quantum-locked to appear as normal components. Because the Nyx nanites are indistinguishable from background particles. Because the Velari quantum taps exist in a state of probability until they're activated. Precisely. Vixthar's scales rippled. We cannot prove your capabilities exist, yet we cannot prove they don't. The uncertainty alone has paralyzed our military command. Half our fleet commanders are convinced their ships are compromised. Our logistics officers suspect every supply line. Even our quantum communications experts are questioning their own systems. Chen sipped her tea quietly, letting the moment stretch. A military built on absolute certainty, Vixthar continued, cannot function under such doubt. You've achieved victory without firing a shot. Not victory, Chen corrected. Change. The galaxy doesn't need a victor, first speaker. It needs balance. The door chimed, and right on schedule, representatives from the Arxur, Nyx, and Valerie entered. They took their places around the table, the first time in galactic history that these species had sat as equals with the Myriad. The Shadow Alliance was never meant to replace Myriad dominance, Chen explained. It was meant to prove a point. That true strength comes from combining different perspectives, different technologies, different ways of thinking. She activated a small holoprojector, showing the Perseus arm colonies. Look at what we've achieved in just 50 years. Arxur crystal tech integrated with human quantum physics. Nyx environmental adaptation systems revolutionizing terraforming. Valerie communication networks making faster-than-light travel more efficient than ever before. And now you want the Myriad to join this collaboration. Vixthar's scales showed skepticism, but also something else, curiosity. We want to build something new, the Arxur representative said, their crystalline voice harmonizing with the translator. Something that preserves the stability the Myriad values while allowing for the innovation they fear. The Nyx delegate's swarm voice added, our different paths of advancement aren't threats to each other. They're opportunities. The galaxy is changing. The Valerie representative's quantum-shifted voice resonated. The question is whether the Myriad will help guide that change or be left behind by it. Vixthar was silent for a long moment, their scales cycling through deep, thoughtful patterns. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight, then we'll defend ourselves, Chen said simply. We'll reveal our full capabilities, disable your critical systems, and force you to the negotiating table anyway. But the cost in lives and resources would be tremendous. And in the end, we'd still be having this same conversation, just with more bitterness and less trust. She leaned forward, her voice softening. But I don't think that's what you want. First speaker, you're not here because of our threats or our technology. You're here because for the first time in 50,000 years, you've seen something truly new, something that challenges everything you thought you knew about how species advance and interact. Vixthar's scales settled into a pattern Chen had never seen before, one that the xenobiologists would later identify as expressing profound realization. You understand us better than we understood ourselves, the first speaker said quietly. We believed we were maintaining order. In truth, we were stagnating, forcing every species to advance along the same path, crushing any development that didn't fit our expectations. It's not too late to change, Chen offered. The Myriad's experience in maintaining stability, combined with the innovation of the Shadow Alliance, imagine what we could achieve together. The room fell silent as Vixthar considered. Finally, their scales shifted to a deep royal purple, the color of formal decree. The Myriad Collective, they announced, proposes a new galactic charter, one that recognizes the right of all species to develop along their own technological paths, while establishing frameworks for cooperation and exchange of knowledge. Chen smiled, feeling 50 years of preparation finally bearing fruit. The Shadow Alliance accepts and proposes the establishment of a joint council to oversee this transition. Equal representation for all member species, with decisions made by consensus rather than authority. One by one, the other representatives signaled their agreement. In that small room, without fleets or weapons or shows of force, the galaxy's future was being reshaped. Later that evening, Chen stood at her favorite spot in the diplomatic quarter, watching Earth's sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Admiral Okonjo joined her, holding a datapad with preliminary drafts of the new charter. It worked, he said, still sounding somewhat amazed. All of it. The hidden alliances, the technological integration, the strategic pressure, 50 years of preparation, and it actually worked. Chen smiled. Because we understood something fundamental about the galaxy, James. It wasn't about having the strongest weapons or the biggest fleets. It was about showing that there's always another way, always another path forward. She turned to face the growing stars, thinking about all the species out there, all the different paths of advancement yet to be discovered. The age of dominance is over, she said softly. "The age of cooperation has begun, and the galaxy will never be the same." Above them, the first vessels of the combined Myriad Shadow Alliance patrol fleet were visible as they entered orbit, not as conquerors or defenders, but as partners in maintaining a new kind of peace, a peace built not on force or fear, but on the simple, powerful idea that different paths could lead to the same destination. Humanity's greatest victory hadn't come from outsmarting or outfighting the Myriad. It had come from showing them, showing the entire galaxy, that the future belonged to those who could adapt, cooperate, and imagine new possibilities. The stars gleamed overhead, no longer distant challenges to be conquered, but bridges connecting all species in their journey forward. Together,